Disaster for the Tories, but it was even bigger than they expected. Certainly it seems to have forced a sudden shift in tactics from Downing Street. John Major now openly talks of the prospects of a Labour victory and tries to frighten the electorate into thinking about what that might mean. Will this work any better than previous Tory campaigns? I'm joined by Peter Hitchens, Assistant Editor of The Express, and Hugh, Colver, former Communications Director for the Conservative Party. Hugh, no excuses, no possibility of excuses, a feeling of desperation in the air. Is this John Major with this new tactic, or do you think it's central office?
Well, I think I would always go for collective responsibility. I'm sure that that's what they would say, and I'm sure that's, in a sense, right. But it does demonstrate there's always a difficulty for governments. There are two centres of power. There is central office and there is Downing Street, whereas the Labour Party are all one team. But I think they would say it was the group as a whole.
Would you have advised them to do this scare tactics? I mean, let me put to you the rather crude way in which the Evening Standard reports a senior Tory figure says our tactics will be scaring the electorate shitless.
Well, it is, of course, an extension of New Danger, New Labour. It's not really, it's moving the question on a bit, but it is actually the thing that they've been saying all along. What I hope they can now do is balance that with some more positive stuff.
Who do you blame for it, Peter Hitchens?
Oh, I blame John Major, and he's created this atmosphere in which they don't know whether they're saying, don't vote for these guys because they keep stealing our clothes and they're just like us, or don't vote for them because they're secretly planning to wreck the country. And they've never been able to make up their own minds. Partly, I think, because they don't actually know what they want to do with the government themselves. We've got a government which is in many respects quite like a Labour government, and which doesn't really have any clear water between it and Labour, and especially in its high leadership. And so when it comes to elections, they're very stuck as to what to say.
Will they ever make up their mind between the two aspects of Labour, stealing our clothes or being secret red-hot socialists?
Well, it's not the matter of being secret red-hot socialists. There is a huge division between the two over Europe, which they simply refuse to exploit. It's quite baffling that they won't do it.
I was rather surprised that they sacked the Lion. The Lion was apparently blamed for the defeated Wirral. And, of course, the Sunday Telegraph tomorrow morning blames the BBC. I mean, what's next? Mystic Meg, will she get the blame for it?
Probably, yes. I mean, I have to say I never really understood the Lion. I mean, what I would hope is that, as I say, we now get some really sort of positive stuff coming through.
Well, the Lion, of course, made everybody think that it reminded them of their cat having a rather unpleasant ophthalmic disease. And was just off-putting for people to look at and didn't really make a point. They say, here is a Labour Party, we don't want you to vote for it because it's in some way frightening. They won't say why.
But have you ever come across a Prime Minister talking about the opposition as if they're about to take power? I mean, Edward Heath, Alec Douglas-Hume never opened their mind to the prospect of a Labour victory.
No, but they're remembering the Sheffield rally and the last time when people began to think, actually, these guys are going to be in government. And they think, and I think they're right, that once people begin to think of Labour as a government, then they begin to think more seriously about what that would be like. There's some sense in that as a tactic.
Do you think it could be a winning tactic, or do you think it's just more desperation?
Winning, no, because they've got to say, we would be different, and they've got to say why.
What they've got to do is break away from the idea, it sounds strange perhaps, they've got to break away from the idea that they're the government. They've got to enter a campaign now as a political party. They've got to put elections behind them in terms of by-elections and behave like the Labour Party and campaign as a political party.
Well, they are behaving like the Labour Party in political terms. In campaigning terms, the campaign only follows the confidence you get from having policies that make sense. If only they would unite themselves on Europe and say, look, we simply aren't going to go into this, that Amsterdam is in danger of being one of the worst international conferences this country has faced since Munich, they would have something to say, right. But they won't say it.
John Redwood says that there's confusion about who's really running the campaign. We need a change of command, he said, of the campaign. Now, there's clear indication there what he's getting at.
Well, I think it's got to be clear that the Prime Minister is running the campaign. I suppose he means who's running it on a day-to-day basis. Is it Michael Heseltine or is it Brian Mulwiney? I think they've actually got that pretty well sorted out between them, and they have different roles.
Well, Redwood says not.
Well, I think he's wrong. I think they're reasonably together on that.
What about the issue of the debate? I mean, that's another tactic which we're beginning to hear. Norman Fowler was talking about it tonight. Is this coming right out of the bottom of the barrel, or is this something which you think
what are they going
to
say in this debate? They have to decide what it is that they're going to say. And until they can make up their minds that they are different, then people will say, well, what's another debate?
Well, John Major thinks
they have debates every Tuesday and
he's
Thursday.
more personable than John Major. People like him and trust him more, and trust is very important. That's what he thinks.
Well, trust him to do what? If again, there's no point asking people to trust you if you're not actually saying that, that there is something that you wish to do with that trust.
Would you advise them to do it, Hugh?
The TV debate, I think it's about personalities and image and impressions, and I would have thought that John Major, with his tremendous personal appeal, which is still sustained, I think, in many ways, his command of a brief, his knowledge of the subject, the weight of being Prime Minister, the fact that he knows the subject, the detail, the policies very well, I would have thought would stand him in quite good stead against
But of course
Tony Blair.
Paddy Ashton would have to come into it.
That's the confusion, isn't it?
Well, there is that, but also I don't think that Tony Blair's team would fail to brief him adequately for a debate of that kind, cramped in time. The only thing that would break up Tony Blair's assurance would be a long-term pounding on serious policies, which at the moment he's not going to get.
Are the Tories going to win, Hugh?
Well, all the evidence is that they're not, and that means that they've got very little to lose. And
Yes
they
or no, Peter?
Go hard for it.
What if neither of them won?
Well, I suppose it's a possibility, but thank you very much for joining the speculation. Hugh Colver, Peter Hitchens.
Now, what's the worst name you can be called in today's new Labour Party? Comrade, brother, socialist? No, it's darling, because these days Labour definitely does not want to be seen as lovey. Not so long ago, Labour was desperate to embrace and be embraced by actors, pop stars, novelists and comedians. No rally was complete without a chorus line of Labour loveys. Ben Elton would be there to tell some thatch gags. Melvyn Bragg would introduce a poetry reading before everyone was serenaded by his long-lost cousin, Billy. On the penultimate weekend of the 1992 election campaign, Labour even threw a lovey Sunday. Neil Kinnock surrounded himself with showbiz pals. They all thought that Labour's attempt to sprinkle itself with stardust was marvellous, but the voters gave it a panning review. So, under Tony Blair, the loveys have been told, don't call us. Too close an association with some professional entertainers can be embarrassing, like when a Blair-supporting band gets busted for possession of cocaine, or when a leading lawyer lovey, the creator of Rumpole of the Bailey, cries tally-ho for fox hunting. And among Mr. Blair's people, there's a fear that the voters see chattering celebrities as frivolous, smug and metropolitan. So these days, the Labour leader is much keener to win the endorsement of dull, rather anonymous business tycoons, such as Jeremy Hardy, chairman of W.H. Smith, and Christopher Haskins, chairman of Northern Foods. Both of them were at the Labour Business Summit the other day. So during the forthcoming election campaign, the loveys will be kept in the wings and the suits will be brought centre stage. Just one word of caution, Mr. Blair. Corporate moguls have the potential to embarrass too. Indeed, Labour's most famous business supporter...
History records that Mr. A.J. Dobbs was elected for Smethwick in 1945 and died on the way to the House of Commons. And there are worse problems. Andrew has been looking at a man who has struggled for 5 years for a vote in the